Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be continuing our journey in e4, e5, and we're going to be taking a look at an opening that is really popular on the amateur level. We're going to be taking a look at the Danish, or possibly the center game, with 2d4. And before we go any further, if you do like this content and you want to see more content like this, please go ahead and hit that like button, and please hit subscribe. It really does help me out. So anyways, after d4, I do recommend simply capturing this pawn. You simply play e captures d4. And of course here, white has numerous options. White can play kind of like a Scotch gambit with knight f3. White can play queen captures d4. White can play pawn to c3 and continue with his Danish gambit idea. Now, the Danish gambit itself isn't a terribly scary opening. Actually, the Danish gambit is one of the few openings where you can really just take all the pawns and get away with it, and this has actually just been a respected method for many years. Even though it's terrifying for me usually to take all the pawns when I do something like this, against the Danish it's very possible. After something like bishop c4 takes and they play here, this has been a well-known kind of refutation of the Danish for over a century. You play this immediate d5, and then the idea is bishop to d5, and then you can play knight f6, and then bishop f7, king f7, and it looks like you just hung your queen, but if you want to take a second, pause the video and just see how you can get her back. And that's correct, the move bishop to b4, hopefully you found that. It's a discovered attack against the queen with the rook, and then when the queen retreats to the square it has to retreat to, queen d2, bishop d2, knight d2, and this position is extremely equal. And that's basically what the Danish is. It leads to this extremely equal position, and this has just been the theory for, the last 100 years or so. So they don't have to necessarily play the Danish, and of course you don't necessarily have to take all the pawns, so I'll talk about both of those things in a second. They could play other versions of this. So another version of the Danish that they could play, or not the Danish, they could play the center game. They could play queen captures d4. This is just simply called the center game. And there was actually a few recent games in this. There's actually a few grandmasters that are willing to try this. It does lose a tempo immediately to knight c6, and then queen e3 creates some awkward development for white. But white can kind of make an argument here. He has a pawn in the middle of the board, and black doesn't. The problem is black's development is really smooth, and it's also very natural. And the game that I'm following here was played between Nepomniachtchi and Magnus Carlsen in Belgium in 2017, and this didn't go very well for Nepomniachtchi. So it went knight f6, just natural move, knight c3, bishop b4, again just natural moves from Carlsen as always, bishop d2, castles queenside, rook e8, queen f4, and then Carlsen took, and then he just took. And he can get away with this. There's apparently nothing wrong with him just snagging this pawn, and then playing d5 in the middle of the board. Nepomniachtchi continued with f3. Carlsen just retreated his rook all the way back. He played a5, which turned out to be a very good decision. His idea is actually just to bring the knight to b4 and create threats. And he did just that after knight b4. And apparently Magnus Carlsen's position is already really good. Not only is black up a pawn, black is the one that's actually attacking the white king. Black's attack against the white king, and this is, for me, it's almost hard to believe, but, I mean, we can believe it, is actually a little bit stronger than white's attack against black's king. And what that has to do with at this point is the center of the board. Black took the center pawn on e4 early with his rook, and because of that, his pieces are able to travel from one side of the board to the other a little bit more smoothly than white's. So this bishop coming to f5 is actually going to create some pretty serious problems soon, and we also have some immediate threats of knight captures a2. And that's just another tip for you beginners out there. Whenever you castle queenside, castling queenside in general is a little bit less secure than castling kingside. When you castle kingside, your king is automatically protecting its three blockers up front, and this unweakened structure is actually kind of difficult to break down and kind of difficult to attack. But when you castle queenside, you typically have to spend one more move to make a safety move, because this pawn on a2 is really weak. And it can be taken advantage of like this, where we move a knight to b4 and we're making these immediate threats. It can be taken advantage of sometimes when people immediately castle queenside, they hang the pawn to some queen captures a2 tactic or something like that, and then the queen will often almost immediately threaten mate on a1. So this is a little tip: is castles queenside is in a lot of openings you're gaining a tempo because you're getting that rook immediately on the open file, which is nice. But you're also losing a tempo in the sense that you're going to have to probably move that king again to make your structure in front of your king as safe as possible. So here Nepomniachtchi makes a mistake. He plays bishop captures f6, and then after queen captures f6, a3, bishop f5, Magnus Carlsen has a blistering attack that just absolutely can't be stopped. Taking the knight is actually a mistake, although that's what Nepomniachtchi did. But once you take the knight, there are huge threats against this king with rook a1 and queen b2. And there's no good way to stop it. And that's exactly what happened. It went knight d5, rook a1 check, king d2. And of course the queen is hanging, so we simply play queen takes b2. And there is no good move here. We are threatening queen takes c2 on the spot. And he didn't have a move. He played queen c7, which captures a pawn and defends against that threat. Unfortunately, there is more than one threat. And after rook to d1, Nepomniachtchi resigned. He is getting mated after king d1, queen b1, and queen e1 will be mate. So that's how Magnus handled the center games. The moves he made were really natural. We just developed. We just played knight f6. We developed our bishop to b4, and we just castled, basically. And that's the general plan in a lot of these early central thrust openings, whether it be the Danish, the Scotch, or the center game. We're going to take up this plan. So there's one other kind of version of the Danish that I want to cover, and it's not the Danish. It's actually called the Goring Gambit, but it's the same idea. It happens after knight f3, knight c6. White opens with the Scotch, which is d4, which I'm going to cover more in another video. I'm going to cover the mainline Scotch. And then after e takes d4, White's going to turn this into a gambit. He's going to play the Goring Gambit. Now, the Goring Gambit is actually quite a bit different than the Danish in the sense that I actually don't recommend taking all of the pawns in the Goring. And actually, for a fair few gambits, I don't recommend taking all of the pawns because it's actually known to be somewhat suicidal in certain gambits. Like in the Evans Gambit, if you take all the pawns, it's considered somewhat suicidal according to theory. And in this gambit, in the Goring Gambit, if you take all the pawns, if you take all three of them in a big diagonal, it's considered suicidal, and I'll show you why. Although you can get away with it in the Danish, you can take all the pawns. But you don't have the same remedy in the Goring, so if you go after all the pawns in the exact same way, and now we try to use our exact same remedy like we would in the Goring with the move d5, we have this huge difference, is they take with the pawn, and they are gaining a huge tempo against this knight. And unfortunately, black doesn't have a good move here. This is major advantage white. The best move that we could maybe come up with is something like knight a5, trying to hit that bishop, trying to gain some tempo back. They could simply play queen a4. This would force c6, takes. We could take back with the knight. They would castle, and every piece under the sun is developed for white, and actually it's very difficult for black to finish his development in any meaningful way. If you develop this bishop, for example, you're hanging this, and on top of that, there's all kinds of pieces that are still coming into this position. Rook e1, the knight's going to be coming in, the bishop can threaten f7, etc. So I came up with kind of a fantasy variation. We'll just try to develop and trade stuff off at the same time. Rook e1 is going to get played, knight f6, knight g5, just triple attacking the e6 square, and there's not a good move here. Queen a5, just desperate to trade material. We can trade off some stuff, but after bishop to e6, this position is still major advantage white. We're not getting our king out of the middle of the board. And white is now equal in material. So he got his material back, white's equal in material, and we're not gonna make it out of the center. That's black. So we don't do that. We don't take all the pawns. So what is the remedy if they play an opening like the Goring Gambit? Well, the second they play the Goring, kind of at the inception of the Goring Gambit, the remedy is you play d5. And you just basically turn this into an isolated queen pawn position. So an example would be e takes d5, queen takes d5, c takes d4. And then you can actually just play bishop g4, bishop e2, and there's a number of different moves, but probably the best move is just to play the other bishop out. Again, just these natural moves, just bishop to b4, knight to c3, and then the most common move, and the most respected move still today, is we just take on f3, bishop takes f3, and then this queen shuffles to c4, and just makes it kind of difficult for white to get castled. It makes white's position really kind of awkward because we're making it difficult for white to get castled, and we're also threatening bishop takes c3, and there's like a whole list of moves that white really doesn't want to play here. He could try to exchange queens with queen b3, but that doesn't look terribly favorable, so the only move that most people play here is bishop to c6 is the main line right now, bc6, and then we can try to trade queens with queen e2, king e2, and we can play this position. But unfortunately, this position is likely just slight advantage black. Black does have some doubled pawns, but this isolated pawn is probably a slightly bigger deal. So this position is slight edge black, and that's just probably what you should do in this position. The other thing that I can recommend is, if you want to, you can also play this way against the Danish. There's no preventing you from playing like this against the Danish as well. After the move pawn to c3, you can also play the move d5, and actually this scores about as well. And it's basically the exact same idea. After e d5, you can play queen d5, c d3, knight c6, and then the vast majority of people here just transpose right into that Goring Gambit position. So if you don't want to have two separate defenses, one for the Danish and one for the Goring, you can simply play the exact same defense against both. You can force the isolated queen pawn, and then you can play this position exactly the same. You can play bishop g4, bishop e2, bishop b4 takes, queen c4, and you can enjoy your exact same slight edge black as you would out of the Danish Gambit. So that's how we face the Danish Gambit, the Goring Gambit, and the center game, all in one go. That's how you face all three of those. And again, you can use the same defense against both the Danish and the Goring. You can play the exact same position, and you can play the exact same middle games if you want. Now, the center game's a little bit different. You have to play a little bit differently, but the moves are very natural. We're just going to play knight c6, gain that tempo, knight f6, and bishop b4. Well, anyways, that's it. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I hope you learned something new about chess, and if you like this kind of content, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much for watching.